Welcome to this GCNC webinar, everyone. I am GCNC co-founder Jill Reddish, and I am so pleased to be joined by an incredible selection of panelists and experts today for this discussion about the European markets and the question of oversupply versus market access. It's a really fascinating topic right now. So we've gathered a selection of operators and experts on the market to dig into the questions that we have. So just a quick couple housekeeping items. There should be the Q&A chat box. Please
Go away,
utilize
go
that.
away, go away, go away.
Yes, there's the Q&A chat box. Please utilize that. I will be monitoring that as well as the chat. Um, so I can feed any questions and highlight them to our panelists. And I want to give a special shout out as we get started to Bo Whitney of Whitney Economics. This whole conversation is rooted in the incredible reports that we have created in a new partnership between GCNC and Whitney Economics. His amazing economic analysis and data really helps us bridge the gap between the raw kind of complex market numbers and the actionable real world business strategies. So thank you so much to Whitney Economics. And I also want to give a special shout out to our sponsors who make it possible for us to provide this amazing content to you. Today, we are sponsored by Rosin Reactor, which is brought to you by Sample Automation, founded by the amazing Andrew Winson. I'll drop their link in the chat. And we're also supported by Maverick PR, created by the incredible Shauna McGregor, who has been such a champion through PR of cannabis businesses all over the world. Um, so I think that brings me through our housekeeping, and we want to dive into the conversation so we can keep it just within our hour. And so without any further ado, I will hand it over to our amazing moderator, Heidi Whitman. Take it away, Heidi, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jill and Chris and GCNC and the sponsors for having me, and of course, our panelists. So I'm Heidi Whitman. If you don't know me, I live in the UK and I'm a global strategist consulting for several different companies. I also am the chairwoman and co-founder of EmpowHer Cannabis Society, the largest female network of professionals in the cannabis space. Over 1,000 now in 43 countries, so very proud. But today I'm so happy to introduce our panelists. So we have Olivia Ewenike, who is a lawyer and a cannabis regulatory and compliance expert for Germany, Mathieu Aubin from Rubicon Organics as a strategist and director, if I'm not mistaken, and Adam Windisch, the CEO of British Cannabis. Today, we're going to discuss this discussion is going to be inspired by one of the most common misconceptions that we hear from operators around the world. And many believe that the UK and Europe is oversupplied, but the data is telling a different story. Europe is already the second largest cannabis market globally by value, but yet remains one of the most fragmented and misunderstood markets in the world. So in the UK alone, the estimated market value exceeds 3 billion, yet only approximately 1 to 2% of potential consumers currently participate in the legal regulated market. So that is not a demand problem, that is a market access problem. The question is not whether Europe is growing, but the question is whether operators truly understand the markets that they're targeting. So today's discussion is not simply about oversupply, but it's understanding the difference between supply, access, adoption, regulation, education, transparency, and long-term market development. So the operators who understand this distinction will be the ones who succeed over the next 3 to 5 years. And the first discussion point about Europe, it's not one market. And I think that is a common misconception. I hear it a lot. And if it's such a large opportunity, why do international operators continue to approach it as a single market? So the report that was produced with Whitney Economics and GCNC clearly demonstrates that the European market's fragmented and that the UK is not Germany and Germany is not France, and each market has different regulations, pathways, pharmacy systems, reimbursement structures, compliance requirements, and cultural attitudes. So I'm just going to direct the first panelist, Olivia, if you can kind of give us an overview, not kind of, but give us an overview of the German legal and regulatory realities from the telemedicine structures to the risks of misunderstanding the German demand.
Yes, thank you, Heidi, and thank you, GCNC, for inviting me. When it comes to Germany, so I think all of you are aware that we had a reform of the cannabis law and legislation in 2024. So it is a two-pillar model right now. We have the recreational space on the one side and then the medical space on the other side. In the recreational sector, it is concentrated as non-profit cultivation associations that are allowed to only grow within their association and then give the cannabis to their members. Because it's a non-profit model, it has shown over time that it is not so interesting for international players right now. And also, there are a lot of hurdles to actually receive a license in the recreational space because even though it's a federal law, the licenses are granted by the state authorities. And here within the states, in the 16 different states in Germany that we have different political opinions about cannabis legalization in general. So a lot of the state authorities are making it more and more difficult to actually get a license because they just don't want to support cannabis legalization, especially in the recreational space. Right now, I think we have something 430, 435 cannabis licenses, therefore, and because the clubs can only hold up to 500 members, it is like nowhere near to fulfilling the demand that we have with 5 million consumers here in Germany. So the more interesting sector definitely here is the medical space. And within the medical space, very quickly, right after legalization, you could say, a lot of telemedicine clinics popped up. And with this telemedicine clinics, is ordering cannabis online is as easy as ordering shoes online. Yes, you fill out an online questionnaire and then you get your cannabis shipped in front of your door in the major cities, even within like the scope of 1 or 2 hours. So it's very easy. Unfortunately, what we see right now, first of all, this whole system is, of course, criticized by the policymakers because this is not what they intended. In Germany, they actually really wanted a medical sector and a recreational sector. They didn't expect that a lot of consumers would switch to the medical sector because it's that easy. And also, because we had some guidelines and provisions before in place, of course, when it comes to prescribing medical cannabis. I think they didn't expect that the telemedicine clinics would not, follow the law as much as they should, or prescribing doctors, for example. That's also an issue here. So that leads to possible changes of the MedCanG. They're already discussed, which would then lead to a necessary in-person consultation of a doctor and a shipping ban, like mail order ban for cannabis. But right now, the system is still thriving. We had 200 tons of imported cannabis here in Germany. Prices are falling, of course. I think that's also no new big news. And yes, overall, I would say there is definitely a lot of room for improvement. Also in the medical space, we have a lot of high THC flower. Consumers most of the time are end of the 20s, 30s, male, white. And yes, this is where we stand right now.
Interesting. And I know the market prices have declined by approximately 25% in just 2.5 years, which is steep. So yeah, it's a very interesting space, and it's good to understand this from your perspective. So thank you. Adam, I'm just going to bounce to you real quick. Obviously, a lot of eyes are on the UK right now. I think I hear that more often than not, especially after the recent shows. And as a CEO of British Cannabis and someone that I've known since we started in this space over here on the legal side, could you want to give like a reality check on what's happening here and why all the eyes are on the UK? Because we do have low patient numbers, but why, the
Yeah,
reason for that is interesting. So I thought you could just elaborate on that a bit.
yeah. I mean, thank you for having me, GCNC. Really appreciate it. But yeah, definitely to answer your question, we're definitely in the infancy. I think a lot of operators, they see the UK market. It's got massive potential. It's a country of around 70 million people. It's got quite a mature cannabis adult use market from the illicit side. Um, but there's a massive potential. It's just nowhere near there yet. I mean, we only legalized medical cannabis in 2018. Now people expect that we should have a really mature market because they're comparing it to California and other countries. But really, that's a really short period of time. If you look at other markets, much more developed medical markets, they'd actually first legalized back in the 90s before they got to where they've got to today, where you're seeing countries like Israel, where they have 140,000 patients. Australia is a good example, although Australia is much more recent. And they look at countries like Australia that has a similar legal system to the UK. I wouldn't say too similar, but similar enough to say, okay, wow, they've got 700,000 patients there. Why do we not have that in the UK? And I think that's down to the way that cannabis was legalized in the UK. It was for a specific reason, to help. There was some kids, I'm sure a lot of people watching know about the stories, with epilepsy. And basically the way that medical cannabis is prescribed in the UK is under specials regulations. So it wasn't really built for cannabis. It was built for an existing way of prescribing a medicine that doesn't exist. If you have an unmet clinical need and there isn't a medicine to help you, then a pharmacist would compound that medicine in the back of the pharmacy, similar to the way that medical cannabis is dispensed in Germany now. So we're nowhere near at the potential. Sorry, going back to my first point, we're nowhere near where we can be. There's a lot of potential. A lot of the reason that it hasn't grown the way it has is really just due to awareness. You'll still ask you'll ask people in the UK, even cannabis consumers, is medical cannabis legal? And I would still say 7 out of 10 would still say no, or if they do think it's legal, they think it's really hard to access, when that's not the case. It's actually pretty easy to get a prescription if you have a legitimate medical need. It's all done by telemedicine. It's all delivered in the post. I think the UK has got massive potential. So people are correct in saying, yes, they should have their eyes on the UK. But we're a long way away from where we need to be. You hear people saying we've got 140,000 patients. If you actually look at the data, it's much closer to 70, 80,000. You've got to look at the active patients. Patients aren't ordering their prescription every month. We're still not bringing in enough patients that would never have considered cannabis before. Cannabis naive people that are on serious pain medicine that could be benefiting from cannabis. So I think we've got a long way to go. Unfortunately, in the UK, stigma against cannabis is extremely high, whereas in other territories where cannabis has been legalized, the stigma was low to begin with. So, got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's very optimistic.
Great. No, and I think also we have to look at the fact that importation and medicine registration, we're strict. And I think that's part of the operational reality when we're bringing in product into the UK. We don't want to oversupply ourselves with flower when we're in the process of diversifying, which we're going to talk about, in a little bit.
What's great is we've got really good local cultivators coming on board now. And I think there's room for domestic and international supply. We don't want to flood the market with low quality cannabis like in other markets. That's not going to help the industry at all. All products need to be, at the end of the day in the UK, the doctor's taking the responsibility for the medicine he's prescribing.
Right. And we'll dive into how we can make this better, but thank you so much. And Mathieu, it was so interesting meeting you on our preparatory calls, and with Rubicon being a very established company in Canada, we talked about the cautious and methodic strategies you utilize to do the international expansion for Rubicon. And I wanted you to kind of go through a little bit about how you envision expansion should be, because I think what you did was quite brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you for having me on this panel. For those of you who don't know Rubicon Organics, we are Canada's #1 premium licensed producer. We grow our product in organic living soil. And we sell it in the Canadian market primarily under brands like 1964, Simply Bare Organic. And 2 years ago, we started looking at international as a strategic way to diversify our revenue stream, de-risk the business. And we took a strategic approach. Our goal was to not rush into trying to go wide and try everything else. We decided to really take a step back and understand what made us unique. What's our unique position that made us successful in Canada, and what are these unique part of these unique positioning? is going to work in international market. So we started looking and researching and having discussion with, distributors, clinic owners, doctors in different countries, and understanding that a lot of doctors are looking for consistent supply of good quality product. And we said, okay, well, we can do that. A lot of high quality product comes from craft producers who don't have a lot of supply. And the bigger companies who have a lot of supply don't necessarily have the same focus on quality. So quality at scale is a unique positioning that we can, really own on the international market. We're growing organic flowers. Doctors like to prescribe flowers that isn't, treated with chemical pesticide or fertilizers. It was really bringing something that's not currently available in market. So we know we could, this was something we could adapt to the medical market. We then started really thinking about where to play, where is, which one are the market that work for where we want to go in that period of time. And for us, we wanted to allocate only a small portion of our production to international so we don't disrupt our domestic market. And the UK market made more sense for us because it's a smaller market that, really values premium where prices are a little bit higher. So if we don't have a lot of biomass available, might as well go for a market where we can get a premium for it versus Germany, where we were seeing a lot of demand for high THC, low price. And that's not, what we had to offer. So the commoditization of the product is not where we want to go. We really wanted to build, approach countries where we knew that we could sell what makes us unique and we could differentiate ourselves. So once we picked UK, we decided to really understand it. And we've done research. So we've approached some patient groups, and then we did research with over 100 patients in order to understand how they consume, what do they consume, what's the condition they're trying to alleviate with their cannabis medication. So for us, what we wanted to do is bring an adapted portfolio of products. We have a very wide range of genetics and products available in the Canadian market, but what we don't want to do, and I think a big mistake that's happening from a lot of the Canadian producers, is to think that their recreational portfolio is just going to translate into a medical market. And I don't think that's, necessarily the case. So for us, by having a deeper understanding of the medical patients, what doctors are looking for, what clinics are looking for, then we could adapt and bring a portfolio of product that was suited for the market. And we've seen great success. And now that's how we're doing every market once at a time. We don't believe in being first to market. We believe in being better to market, because over time, consumers and patient will move to the better option over the first option.
No, absolutely. Being first isn't always best. And I think, individual strategies are essential in order to make any sense of international expansion, the validity and the feasibility, of course. And yes, so I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad to hear that. Demand versus access, there's if millions of potential consumers exist across these regions, all of the regions of Europe and the UK, why do we think that the legal patient numbers are still relatively low? And we do have access limitations here in the UK that has been demonstrated. There are a lot of hurdles. Sometimes there's not an API at the clinic that connects to your healthcare summary. I mean, there's all different types of reasons. And of course, as Adam stated, a lot of people just don't know. And then with significant patient demand and legal participation seeming very low, I think it's not even just the awareness of cannabis itself, but it's the access pathways, the affordability, and of course, the prescriber confidence. The regulatory complexity in certain regions also have a lot to do with, the demand kind of waning, although access is sort of there. So there is a bit of a disconnect and the fragmentation remains. Adam, going back to what you were just discussing, because I do see that we've got access pathways, clinics, pharmacies, but there's also product registration and looking at the true consumer and patient at the end of the day, which is going to determine the demand. Well, often I hear there's no demand for that. Well, no one's brought it to anyone's attention that it could be viable. So
Yeah,
what's your
I think
thoughts
there's
here?
massive demand for, balanced products and lower balanced flour and, different formats as well. I think and I think that's honestly what will bring in more cannabis naive, your auntie, your uncle that would never consider grinding up flour. So there's always going to be a place for flour, in my opinion. I just think it's not going to be the dominant format like it is now. As the market grows. I think, what Mathieu mentioned before is very important as well. It's consistency. Unfortunately, a lot of the flour that's come in up until now hasn't necessarily been consistent. As I said before, the doctor is the one that's responsible when he prescribes something, or he or she prescribes something. He's taking responsibility on that product. You need a clinical need to get in. So we were mentioning pathway, how to get product into the UK. You need an actual clinical need. So you need a doctor to say he's got X amount of patients that have this unmet clinical need to bring in this specific strain of flower or this, oil or whatever. Otherwise, you're not going to get it in. And then if you're bringing in finished product format, if you've got a WDA, then you'll bring it in. You'd need the MHRA and the Home Office involved in that. But also bringing in as an API, you need to, show that it meets the strict standards of the UK. And then obviously to release the product, it still has to meet all of those standards. And finding producers that can actually keep up with that and keep patient confidence. Because you get patients that came into the market when it first started, and they were so disappointed, they went back to the illicit market. In the UK, another thing is the illicit market's so big, it was hard for the medical market to compete as well in some ways, as crazy as that sounds. I think we need to educate people more about how much safer it is to, if you're consuming cannabis on a daily basis, you're 99% of the time you're a medical cannabis patient, so or you're self-medicating. So yeah, I think that answered your
Yeah, absolutely.
question.
And I'm just going to add a little bit here from my standpoint, which I've discussed on stage several times this year. But we're looking to increase patient numbers. So in order to do that, we need to embrace the wider demographics and the diversification in the forms of administration. And I see it happening. So it's a really positive move. British Cannabis is doing it. I really support that. The flower market and intoxicating options are not for everyone. And this is why I believe that there's limited numbers, because if it looks like the illicit market and you've never touched cannabis in your life, why would you go into something that maybe was, stigmatized to you throughout the, and the propaganda really stuck, especially if anyone's over 40 to 80, they're not going to sit there and vapor flower.
They're going to say, oh, you're just getting a prescription because you want to get high. And that's not true. Like we've discussed this many times, Heidi. I mean, most patients just want to feel good. They want to have a normal life. They don't
want to be part of life. If
Exactly.
you're intoxicated, you can't be. But I do see this happening with meter dosing, and this meter dosing too is going to provide the confidence our prescribers, who are just as cautious as our regulators, are doing a good job at being cautious, because we want to only have the best, but these prescribers want to see measurable parameters, and those measurable parameters will also provide data and new adopters. So yeah, thank you so much for the UK's version of where we're at with demand and access. Olivia, I'm going to pop to you. The telemedicine model today, I mean, we talked about this yesterday about the use of telemedicine being extremely easy compared to some other countries. Do you want to go through a little bit about, whether this access point is creating actual patient demand, or are there real patients being left out?
Yes, of course. I mean, definitely the real patients, I would not say that they're left out, because they can also have access over telemedicine. The problem is for a lot of patients here in Germany. I mean, when we look at the numbers of users of telemedicine clinics, I think it's like up to 1 million, something like this. All of this is private payment, yeah? So that means that everyone who uses telemedicine in Germany has to pay for their product, for their medicine out of their own pockets. When it comes to reimbursement from health insurance, flower right now can still be reimbursed, but because of the reputational damage that telemedicine causes here in Germany, and the mixture between recreational and medical, there's also already a draft about changing that. So that would mean that public health insurance would not reimburse flower anymore for patients here. That would, of course, significantly also affect the patient numbers, and in general, I would say would cause harm on the whole industry. Of course, there are now a lot of voices against this with very good arguments, but this is one example where we see exactly what this mixture between recreational and medical does. Yes, what this reputational damage actually has for consequences, and that is not a long-term strategy, but it's just a strategy for quick revenue, for quick bringing product into the market, and then long-term it will fall on our feet, and we have to deal with the consequences, because like I said at the beginning, the policymakers here in Germany, they will not stand aside and keep this system going and running. And in regard of the patient numbers here in Germany, whenever you are in the conference or on a panel, etc., and you have, I would say, interested parties on those panels and the participants, and they're talking about this kind of model. And they're always raising the questions. Yes, but are they really consumers? Are they not patients? Maybe they are patients, yes? Well, the numbers speak for themselves because, like I said, the average user of a telemedicine platform is male and maybe end of 20s, beginning of 30s, having back pain or, sleeping issues, etc. During Mary Jane, I talked to a GP, to a general practitioner about this, and asked him also, he does work in science, and I asked him about this and what is his opinion in that regard. And he said it's very clear. I mean, there were the sudden rise of patients, how the marketing is structured. I think Mathieu mentioned it in the beginning. When we look at the producers and the strain names and everything, it's very recreational, yes? At the beginning, we still had some old, or let's say, we had some medical companies that were already there before the reform. We have medical cannabis in Germany since 2017. And at the beginning, their flower name or how they brought their product to the market was actually medical. Yes, you can see also by the strain variety, THC variety, content variety, and all of that. Quality. Also a big issue in Germany right now. All of that was medical. But now we see even those companies changing their portfolio a little bit when it comes to strain names, etc., and clearly addressing a recreational audience. So I would say that it's a facade to say that a lot of this that a lot of this numbers come from real patients. Of course, with the legalization, with the cannabis being more available, I'm sure that we have more patients in general. Maybe some people found the medical value of cannabis through the legalization. That's clear. But the majority of the users, when it comes to these clinics, are definitely consumers right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and it's also how we got started. Even in the legal market here in the UK, we were importing from Canada immediately, and it was flour. And like I said before, if people have never touched flour, that is probably not their go-to for medicine, and prescribers really had to wrap their head around kind of an ambiguous dosing system. But Adam, yes, go on.
No, I just more on that point. I think it's very, very essential. It's very important for us as an industry to preserve the medical market. It's a much longer term. It's in the longer term, it's going to pay off. Unfortunately, I've seen many other markets where they've gone recreational and they're just the medical market. Look at California. It's very hard to find actual medical products that aren't really high THC. So, if we do that, we just leave patients behind at the end of the day, and that's not good for anyone, I don't think. And as if you're a consumer, yeah, you'll buy one brand this month, you'll buy another brand that month, you want to change all the time. There's no brand loyalty, there's no sticking with their medicine. Obviously, yes, with cannabis patient-centric, you do need to change sometimes different strains, but yeah, I think it's essential that we don't muddy the waters with so I was just agreeing with Olivia, really.
Yes. No, and Mathieu, I'm going back to what I like is that you really did your strategic expansion planning. So when you were in this midst, where did you find the demand just from your point of view, being a long-term company and tenured in the space? How did you look at it from a Rubicon standard?
Yeah, for us, data is always tricky. Even in a mature market like the Canadian market, data is, it's not perfect. So what we know though is that there are enough consumers to sustain, the demand growth and what we have to offer in the market. So for us, we looked at it a bit differently. We know, there are enough patients in the markets to absorb the product we want to send there. So we believe though that the biggest problem, when it comes to patient counts or something like this is really, it comes to low awareness. I think that patients don't know that it's an option. The doctors are hesitant to prescribe. And for me, this all roots to two things. We need to, the industry itself has done that too. We've done that to ourselves by rushing into markets, trying to sell versus building the pillars for a long-term growth and the long-term sustainability of the industry. And for me, this long-term sustainability goes through education. Clinics need to understand what are the difference between what's the difference between the different product, and what's the how can that fit the needs of their patients. I think having, for us, we do programs where we try to educate clinics on the different product we have to offer and why it would be good for different people. I know you and I had that discussion during our preliminary, but having an offering like Blue Dream for us, which is a low THC product, and it does very well because we are telling clinics that a low THC sativa, 18 to 20% THC, is a great offering for a new patient. You don't want to prescribe a 30% indica to someone who's never consumed flower. It's going to create a bad experience. So making sure we have offerings that is adapted to the different patient is very important. And I think that comes from education. This was also the second pillar is trust. I think the industry needs to build trust. Trust through that kind of education, making sure we are a partner with the clinics and the doctors, but also by providing quality and consistency, just really acting like a mature industry. Like right now, I feel that there are still a lot of bad actors out there, whether it's in more mature market like Canadian, but an emerging market like some of the European market. Companies, if we want to have a sustainable, and long-term viable industry, we need to partner with the doctors, with the clinics. We need to cater to the patients, because at the end of the day, it's the patients who buy our product, and we need to make sure we build that trust. And that's going to come through education, and building that long-term bond.
Yeah, and demand doesn't automatically translate into massive market opportunity too.
Yeah.
The access determines the success, and like you said, the education of those on the ground who are going to be active in moving product is
And
essential.
if we do build that, people will come, patient will come. You will see transition from the legacy market into the legal market, because now there will be a sustainable long-term industry and people will have built trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I think that's, hitting the nail on the head, if I might say so myself. I'm going to move on to the transparency and traceability and feedback loops, because we hear a lot about this. I support Cannabis, which does this, but there are a lot of other companies talking about this. And that means that we're raising our standards in all of the industry. And also this traceability calls out anyone that's cutting corners or mislabeling or changing docs, because even though I've been in it for 11 years and I still see it happening. So when we look at the shipment volumes and the import statistics to understand true market demand, what manner would we do that in? How we know what the industry currently has grown and shipped, but we don't know what's been prescribed, what's been reordered, what's been destroyed, the products patients prefer, products generating repeat demand, what are those? And without these feedback loops, operators frequently mistake the supply for the demand. And I think that is a bit of a misrepresentation. I'll just also add, when you talked about trust, Mathieu, transparency is trust. And if we want to be taken seriously, if we want to be a medicinal, I'm speaking from the UK standpoint, from a medicinal market, that traceability from cultivation all the way through to the patient is essential. And patient feedback can be done in an anonymized manner. And I think that will also give prescribers education and help steer crops. Because when you know what your patients are ordering, you know what to grow. I've seen it too often that people grow what's not necessarily moving. And then there's stock. I think Adam can attest to that sometimes. But we do need, further governance, more accountability. And we also need to know who we're purchasing from. So committing to excellence, thorough documentation, understanding, quality control, etc. Now, with product intelligence opportunities to help with forecasting, crop steering, affordable options, and more, I think this data is going to be the future. And Olivia, with the German market, we saw some data together when we were in Berlin, but what do we know beyond compliance? Like, how do we get that real world product intelligence from your standpoint in the current state of Germany right now?
Currently, very difficult, I would say. We have a huge data gap in Germany because we don't have any federal data collecting tool or any, I would say, broadly available, yes, but used data collecting software. There are some players on the market, but the problem is that it's not standardized, and the problem is that we don't have it on every aspect. Yes, if you, for example, would track data from telemedicine and the users there, that is not the whole medical market as well. So the problem in Germany, it's exactly what you said, that the supply can be mistaken for the demand. We have seen there's huge numbers everywhere in all the cannabis newsletters about 200 tons being imported to Germany, etc. But at the same time, we actually don't know how much of this product really was prescribed and how much of this product was then used by the patient. And also, there's one further aspect of this. Prescription alone doesn't really mean that the product was then collected from the pharmacy too, because especially when it comes to telemedicine, etc., and traffic rules here in Germany, sometimes a prescription is needed from the patient just so he has some, medical justification of being a patient. So a lot of, as far as I know, also from my clients, a lot of patients and a lot of consumers are getting prescriptions and they don't even collect the medicine afterwards. Yes, so this is also not a reliable number. So we really, really need to have something in place to gather data in order for the producers, like you said, to know what is needed, the needs of the market, how much to produce, but also when it comes to product variety, what is effective. Because right now, this is the time, in general, we're not even talking about the last year or the last couple of years, but I would say this age that we are right in of the cannabis legalization in general, where we can really start do some research on this data, and we can grow as an industry long term through this data, and it's available because now there are consumers, because now there are patients. And I don't know why, especially the policymakers, are not using this momentum right now in order then to adjust policy, understand patient needs, and also understand the full medical potential and value that this plant has, because this is also not fully researched yet. Yes, so yeah. This is where we
financial and healthcare economics combined are possible, and it's incredible that it's not really clear yet, but it will be. There was a question from an attendee for you, Olivia. Is there any chance Germany won't allow GACP flower entering the market?
I mean, in the future, or
I'm not sure. Just in general, maybe in the future. Let's go with the future.
I would say the GACP flower, that is like one necessity, of course, but it also needs to be GMP, yes, EU GMP. So that means you need to have some in-between production step here in Europe. One part that might change here, because that is a very important point when it comes to quality and quality stability here in Germany, is that we already saw that some of the medical flower that we have here in this market is contaminated, and it doesn't have the necessary quality to be actually considered as medical. Of course, because everything is right now in a sped up process, the policymakers are always a little bit behind to catch up on this kind of things. But we know that this comes most likely because of GMP washing. So the GMP, the flower gets imported from third countries, and there's a GMP washing step in between, and then therefore it gets contaminated, or the decontamination process has not been done as it should be. So we have researchers that tested some flower and that found out that it is contaminated and this most likely could be the reason. If the policymakers catch up on this, I think that there could be some refinement in regard of the process. And that could also then make it a little bit more difficult to get flower from third countries outside of the EU into the EU in the future. But right now, I don't see any amendments that would make it impossible or anything like that.
No, excellent. No, thank you. I'm going to go hop to Mathieu real quick. So with with your research that you've done, and I know you've done some other research in Canada too. I mean, is there a way to review that real quick for everyone that's attending today? Because I thought that was also very valuable when looking at international work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key metrics to be successful in market is to talk to whoever's going to be buying your product. To any pharmaceutical markets or CPG market, we do research and we understand who our consumers are, and cannabis is not different than any of those. So we strongly believe in in data and in consumer research. So in Canada, every 3 years, we survey 3,000 cannabis consumers. We've done it in 2020, 2023, and now we've just done it in 2026. And we've seen an evolution from, close to legalization to where the market is right now. And it's fascinating to see how consumers, and reminder that Canada is a recreational market, so slightly different, but we're seeing a big shift away from what used to be heavy flower market, because that's what was happening in the legacy market, into more convenience, people looking for pre-rolls, edibles, vape, instant gratification products that are easy to use. We're also seeing a big uptick of minor cannabinoids, people starting to really understand the plant a little bit more and the minor cannabinoids and how they can use those minor cannabinoids to really fit their needs throughout the day. So that's quite fascinating. And then, when we have done our first research in the UK market to understand the patients, and what we're seeing is, distributors, all they ask us is high THC flower, low price, but, we wanted about, is that really what the patients are looking for? And that's not exactly what's coming out. There's a lot of patients who are looking for functional flower during the day. They're not necessarily looking for pain management or sleep aid. They're looking for focus or something that can help them to go through the day. And there's not a lot of offering right now for those patients. So that was is a big learning for us. There's also, when we talk to doctors, we understand that they don't love necessarily prescribing flower. Flower is not it's harder for the doctors to see it as a stable medical product. They having something like oils or capsules or edibles that are always the same exact amount of THC that's very predictable. These are products that the patients but also the doctors would be looking for. So we are working with regulators and with the distributors in order to bring more of those product to market. And the same thing as when we talk to legacy consumers who are not yet into the legal market, and that was part of our research and understanding what's the barrier to come into the legal market, because that's what at the end of the day is legalization is in part to shift consumers from the illegal market into the legal market and offer them some safe product through education and access. And we're realizing that a lot of those formats, concentrates formats and other products that are being used in the illegal markets are not yet available in the legal market, and that's driving consumers to stay in the illegal market. So I think really having a holistic understanding of who we're selling to, who could we potentially be selling to, and whether it's in a medical market or a recreational market, is the key to success, to make sure that the offering is catered to who's going to be buying the product.
It's common sense to me
it's
to
common
do
sense, but it's not been
I don't know
done
why
yet.
we haven't done it yet. I mean, look, I remember doing focus groups for alcohol back in the day, willingly,
correct, right?
because they weren't going to make a whole bunch of Aperol unless they knew people were going to drink Aperol. So I mean, it goes along with the same thing. For us,
and when I was talking earlier about maturity of the industry, this is where we need to go. This is where the industry needs to stop acting like more of a legacy market, attitude where, if I got good weed, they'll come and then here's a bag of weed. That's not the way the market needs to evolve. It's about, really deeply understanding the consumers in order to offer them the right products. And this is, that's going to build trust with the doctors and the patient. And this is what's going to make the industry successful over time.
And it's the two demographics. It's those who are currently using on the illicit, and then the patients that have no idea. And that's why flower is just going to be a very confusing product to take home and say, how do I use this?
Yep.
Everything's becoming, familiarity and in commonplace use is something that's going to be very important. Adam, the prescriber confidence methods at British Cannabis, you work with wellness and with medical, which is quite unique. And when you're looking at the quality assurance of your products and how you provide confidence, what are some of what is some of what you've done that you've seen very successful, and maybe some parts that might not have worked as well?
I mean, I guess you could say our wellness side is like our adult use, because that's the equivalent. It's the only adult use market we have in the UK, over the counter. So we manufacture also for international markets other minor cannabinoids, and it's nice what Mathieu said before. It's true that we are seeing rise in demand, but we manufacture our wellness products to a medical standard. We don't have to, but we do. Anyone's welcome to come to our facility and see. Everything we produce is with COAs. We test in-house and third-party test everything we release. I think that's essential, and I think, yeah, I mean that should be the gold standard for every company. To be honest with you, it's only going to cause issues for us. I mean, we did see an issue with the CBD market in the UK when there were so many bad players out there and they kind of lost the trust of consumers because they were I mean, even recently, we one of our best-selling products is our patch, and it really helps. Like, I even used it the other day for my arm, and it really helped. And I'm not just saying that because it's our product, but it actually works.
But it's subtle. It's subtle use and it's commonplace use. People sell
Yeah,
patches
and
for
it's
everything.
non-intoxicating. Yeah, and it's actually got what it says it does. We test it, but we actually bought a competitor's patch that they were selling online, and we tested it just to see if it had 0%, not even 1 milligram. It had 0 milligrams of CBD, and they're selling these products to unknowing consumers that think, oh, I'll try CBD for the first time. Maybe, I heard it's good. Maybe it might help me, and someone might be really suffering, even though you're not meant to make medical claims about anything, but especially wellness products.
Yep.
That's just going to take away their confidence in cannabis as a whole. Not
Yes.
just, we do see growth in understanding of how CBD and over the counter can be used alongside medical products, which is great. It's affordable for patients.
And it's a gateway drug to understanding medical cannabis. CBD is. That's how I
Yeah, I
look at
mean,
it.
it's going to
Any
help
minor
with
that's non-intoxicating seems to me as
as
a
well. Exactly.
just familiarity becomes. I want to quickly, because I'm conscious of time. We got a question from Botswana. Which approach gives new entrants the greatest credibility with EU buyers? Through offtake agreements before expanding cultivation, or should operators first focus on achieving all their certification? I'm going to go with achieving certification, but what do you all think?
Yes, I
I
think
would
also
agree.
certification, but also I would definitely recommend to have some LOIs or something in place and start looking out for those because at some point you will definitely need also the offtake agreements. Yes, so it is good
Absolutely.
maybe to start with the certification, get everything in place, but have some LOIs or something in place as well.
Yeah, everyone
And I
agreeing.
would
I
also
agree.
say, a unique differentiator. What is of course, the certification is, I think, the starting point of any discussion. But when you approach after that the different distributors, it's about what's your unique selling proposition. Is it strains that are not currently available in market? If it's low price, high THC, it's a muddied market, and the commoditization of the industry is probably not the long-term success factor for it. So, what makes your offering different than what's out there right now? And if you can articulate that, I think this is a very good starting point for
Absolutely.
good discussion with distributors.
Absolutely. And also to really understand, like you did, all of the market statistics, figure out as much as we have right now. And going back to Adam, the governance and the compliance and the traceability is going to make the confidence throughout the entire
System,
ecosystem.
which is very hard to get. I mean, that's why, I mean, I personally, yeah, I mean, before we release flower to the market, we're literally releasing now. For the first time, we only released sublingual oils, and the main reason was because we don't want to release products that aren't consistent on month to month. We don't want to release a product to a
It's good.
patient that helps them. So we partnered with a cultivator that produces flower. For the last 5 years, they've been producing consistent batches every month, the same, so that patients will have the exact same every time. And that's exactly the same with our oils. They're exactly the same. You can take them last year and this year, they'll be exactly the same. I think that's
Yeah.
essential, and that builds up prescriber confidence as well.
It's going back to taking the time to doing the research, to hiring strategists to look at things. You need people on the ground to give you the truth, and long far are gone are the days of not being truthful because it's really easy to be found out. So it's great, great conversation. I just want to quickly go on to a very important part about pricing compression because we do have a lot of price compression going on in various areas. And like we said, the market prices declined in Germany 25% in 2.5 years. Wholesale prices compressed down to €2 a gram. I have had a recent group want to get £7 per gram on wholesale. So there is a lot of high THC trap and pricing compression. And why are operators still competing primarily on THC percentage? Because these margins are continually compressing, and the global oversupply has created a downward pricing pressure. So as we mature, and commoditization becomes inevitable, how do companies differentiate themselves when selling it, when everyone is selling flower? because everyone is selling flower right now. So Mathieu, I'm going to go straight to you because you have the
Yeah.
Canadian history, the market lessons, etc.
I mean, when you talk about price compression, we've been through it, believe me. Everyone that comes to me and say, "Oh my gosh, we're going through price compression." I'm like, "Oh wow." Like wait for it. It's not done and then it's gonna continue to happen. But the market stabilizes and we've seen it in Canada. But the important thing here is that don't follow that trend because then, once you go down on your price, it's very difficult to go back up. Instead of going down your price, find out how you can increase the value of your product, and then it's for sure right now one of the problem that's in markets, including the Canadian market, is the limited communication tools that distributors, licensed producers, doctors have to talk about the product. And that creates a value equation where consumers only see THC and only see price. It's pretty much the only two things they see. So they make this value equation where higher THC, lower price is better value. And that's very understandable. This is where, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but, focusing on education on terpenes, you can have a lower THC, high terpenes product that will deliver a much greater entourage effect than, a high THC product that, is strictly THC. Talking about the minor cannabinoids, this is like, for me, this is where we step away from price THC and into what the market looks like. I often compare cannabis to wine. People don't buy their wine because it has a higher percentage of alcohol. They buy their wine because from where it's coming from, because of the aromas, because they like the taste profile of that particular product. Well, it's, they want a white wine or rosé for a hot day and they want a red wine for a heavy steak dinner, whatever it is. But, there's different wine for different occasion. There are different cannabis for a different occasion. And if we can start talking about cannabis in a way where, and again, that's more of a rec market reference, but even on the medical market, there are patients who, as I mentioned earlier, are looking for pain management or sleep aid or focus. If we understand the patients better, we'll be able to offer a better product, and then we'll be able to command a higher price because there's no long-term, nobody's going to win in the long-term price compression, high THC level. Like this is not sustainable for the industry, and that will lead to cutting corners when it comes to quality of the product. It'll erode trust with the doctors, with the regulators. And, it's going against what, a strong and a sustainable industry should be communicating with patients and doctors. So for me, we need to think beyond that. And, at some point it's about building brands as well, because brand is also a link to trust. If we by building trusted brands, consumers will be looking at those brands and say, okay, well, I've tried a certain product from those. I can try another product from that same company because I've had good experiences. It's always been in supply. Quality has always been good. And then, so again, thinking about a mature industry, thinking about this industry as a proper long-term CPG product industry is what is going to be helping us move away from this price compression, high THC, low price.
It goes right back to what we were saying at the beginning. If we diversify and if we look at the people and we want to grow the market, this is not the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. So I'm going to hop over to Olivia about Germany, if you wouldn't mind just discussing the pricing realities and the purchasing behaviors right now that you see when it looks, is everything high THC?
Yes, I mean, we already mentioned it a couple of times here. Also, I think one crucial point is that the price is, you get a little bit more per gram if the THC content is higher. So it's ranked according to the THC content. That, of course, is a factor. And then through the model and how we see it right now, of course, the flower is more or less directed to the alleged consumer needs and less to what a doctor would prescribe, because how you do it is, like I said, you order shoes online, so that means that the consumer or the patient is choosing the product and then it gets prescribed. But in reality, if this system fails, and it is very likely that it will change, the doctors would actually be the ones that you have to convince then at the end, because they then have to prescribe what they think is necessary for the treatment. So yes, of course, it's about education, but Mathieu also said it. It's really about trust or building trust of a brand. And their reputation, quality stability, product variety, and how everything is presented, if it's presented as medicine, and also how the brand presents themselves and how they secure quality, etc., is very important for the consumer right now, who most likely is just about what does it look like, how does a flower look like presented on a website, what does it say, will it do to me, yes, will it make me happy, will it make me sleep. This is like only a very high level, surface level consumer needs that we address right now. But when the system changes, we actually have to talk to experts, and we have to convince experts and educate experts again. So I think a long-term strategy would be, and if you lost their trust, and this is one problem that I see now when I talk to doctors and also to pharmacies a lot, when you lose their trust, it will be very difficult to regain this once the legislative framework changes. And one further point also, because we're always talking about demand. Here in Germany, I think maybe from a wholesale perspective, there is a demand of high THC flower, etc. Yes, but actually from the pharmacies, on the pharmacy level, all of them are telling us that they would need more product variety, and that most of the time they're very quickly out of stock when it comes to mid-range flower and other kind of products. So there is a need, but it just doesn't get fulfilled with how the system is structured right now in Germany. This is also, yes, circling back to the data collecting problem, and that producers are not aware of how it is here inside of the country. And Heidi, what you said, that you really need someone on the ground to help you and give you this kind of information.
Excellent. Thank you. We're really, really close on time. Adam, do you want to say a quick bit?
Yeah, I agree with all of those points. Just a very quick point. I mean, we talk about value products. I think people need to look at it, especially because it's a private market in the UK. Everyone's paying it for out of pocket, very, like 1% maybe on the NHS, even less than that. So it's value for money. Are you getting value for money? If you're buying a product that's £9, but you're going to, £90 for 10 grams or £9 a gram, and it's going to, you're going to have to use less of it because it's rich in terpenes and it's got other minor cannabinoids and it's everything the other panelists said. You're going to get more value for money than buying something for £4 or £5 that you're not going to use, and it's not going to help your condition. So you really got to look at the value for money, and I think there's always going to be room for premium products because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to do a quick takeaway from today's discussion because it is quite simple. We don't necessarily have a demand problem. We do have an access problem, education problem, and definitely a lot of misunderstanding, which is where this report has come into play. And I was happy to help contribute to it, as well as Adam. The winners in Europe are not going to be producing the most flower, but they're going to be the operators who really understand the market access, building trust, transparency, leveraging data, feedback loops, diversifying products, and really hitting the real patients, the demographics, the people that don't even know we exist, in order to regain some confidence within the prescribers, the investors especially, and more so. So the next 5 years are not going to belong to the loudest, but the most trusted, as we talked about. So the value of data and transparency right through the patients and consumers is going to be the long-term sustainability plan. And I believe we should all just work together to level up on standards, because that's what we need to do. And we're doing a great job, but now we just get to take it one step further. So thank you all so much for being here. And Jill, thank you for having me moderate. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and a huge thank you to all of our panelists. It's just been an incredible discussion. I love seeing the questions come in. Our attendees are eager to connect with each of you after the panel. So I'd like to invite the panelists to drop their contact information, whatever kind of preferred method that might be, in the chat so that people can reach out. Feel free to reach out to me through GCNC, and I'm happy to put people in touch. That is what we do with GCNC. We are the connectors and the pollinators for the experts and the information that is out there. So as we wrap up, I would like to give a shout out again to Bo Whitney with Whitney Economics for producing these excellent reports that have inspired this conversation and many, many more, of course. A big thank you to our sponsors again, Maverick PR and Sample Automation with the rosin reactor. Thank you for making this possible for us to produce this video, which of course this is being recorded, and we will send the video recording out in a few short days. So check your email for that. And I think that's everything. So thank you again so much for attending, panelists. Thank you so much for your time and for coming to join us to share your expertise and experiences. It's been incredibly valuable, and each of you are just such a pleasure to work with. Thank you for being such amazing contributors to our industry.
Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you
Much
very
Thank
much.
you very much
Have a
for
great
having me.
evening, everybody. Stay cool. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Bye.